y'all can see my screen. So again, this is a Creative Cloud overview for MWR marketing, and just a little bit about me. This is my email address right here. If you have any questions about the stuff that you're going to see today, you can shoot me an email really quick. I've been with Adobe for 6 years now, and like Sharon said, I'm a solutions consultant for DoD and intelligence community around our creative desktop tools. I have a number of Adobe certifications, most notably Photoshop, Dreamweaver, InDesign, Illustrator, Flash, and Acrobat. So I also have a computer art degree, and I don't get a lot of sleep. So this is the life that I lead. Today we're going to be talking, well, we've basically given the introduction, but we're going to talk about what exactly the Creative Cloud is. I know for many of you on the phone, Creative Cloud is something that you use or you may be thinking about using, and so we're going to clarify exactly what it is. As somebody in MWR marketing or in Army IMCOM, there might be questions around how exactly you can get it, especially if you're on a classified or secure network, so we're going to talk about that. Something really important that a lot of customers ask me about is training and support, especially around the Creative Cloud, and our offerings have changed and are more accessible than ever. So I wanted to make sure that you get the up-to-date contact information and learn more about our training programs. Just a quick success story that we've seen in defense, and I know that Army IMCOM and MWR marketing has some great success stories that we would love to bring to light, so I wanted to make myself available to you to talk about some of the success that you've had with Adobe's tools, and then I really wanted to leave the last 15 minutes for questions. So please feel free to type questions as they come in the chat pod, and I'll read through them, and then we can talk a little bit more at the end. So today is really an overview to give you a sense of all the possibilities. And then tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern and also 9 p.m. Eastern, I'm burning the candle at both ends, we're going to dive deeper into the actual workflows themselves, the actual tools. Once you understand kind of the bigger picture, we can go into digital imaging, illustration and graphics, publication, web and mobile, and really kind of dive deeply and more deeply into the actual workflows and tools. I wanted to make you aware that even though tomorrow we're focusing on a subsection of all of the capabilities that are inside of the Creative Cloud, our team, a few of whom are on the line right now, have actually put together a comprehensive webinar series for the Department of Defense that's running from this week all the way through August of 2014. It's going to be covering every tool in the Creative Cloud toolbox and a number of our enterprise digital marketing tools as well. And as marketers, you might be very interested to see some of the features of the enterprise tools that Adobe puts out into the market, the enterprise server technology, document technology, web content management, digital asset management, analytics, social, all the other enterprise capabilities that are not core to the Creative Cloud tool. You might be interested to see what those are and how that can help your mission for marketing. So again, this webinar series is going to be going on through August. The link is down here. And you can actually get that link and this entire slide deck, with some exceptions for the stock imagery, at this QR code and this URL down here, which I'll bring up again at the end when we're going through our questions and answers. But you can get all the links that I'm going to show pretty soon. So just to do a quick introduction of digital media in government, this word from Forrester Research in its predictions for 2014 around cloud computing has this really interesting quote that talks about the shifting of focus to systems of engagement and the agility in refining critical customer tools. That pretty much describes all of our jobs. I saw that there are a lot of digital imaging and publications and web design, web development folks on the line. And really what we do all day is create systems of engagement for folks in the Army to communicate. And these tools become ever more critical as the landscape changes. we may have gone to school and learned how to do print, to get ink under our fingernails and learn how to do layout in picas and inches. Or we may have learned only pixels and only CSS and divs, or only Flash and interactive media. Or we learned how to do compositing and how to do motion graphics and special effects and 3D animation. But whether you're doing print for publications or print for signage, or whether you're doing websites, mobile applications, or you're doing film and video, it has always been very much an either-or proposition. You do print or web or video, but nary the twain shall meet. And usually the tools that you wind up specializing in, learning in school or picking up on your own are stovepiped along those lines as well. So there have been a number of different changes to the media landscape that have contributed to those boundaries being kind of worn down. One of them happened on June 29, 2007, and I'm sure if I looked in the chat pod right now, let's see, does anyone have a guess for what happened on June 29, 2007? I know Sharon looks like she's writing in there. Anybody else have a chat-based guess for what Acquire Macromedia? No, good guess. It was actually a little later than the Macromedia acquisition. So what happened on June 29, 2007 was the iPhone came out, right? You had this little smartphone computer in your pocket, and all of a sudden that's where all the eyeballs went. It went to this small screen that you're holding in your hand. So all the great work that you did in Flash, you couldn't really see it there. And the form factor of websites required a lot of pinching and zooming and a lot of scrolling around with your index finger. It was not a particularly optimized web experience at the time. And then in 2010, the world kind of changed a little bit more with the mobility offered by the tablet revolution, right? Only since the days of Moses have tablets been so important. So our consumption of content has changed, and you'll see this across the Army and across the DoD, but also the creation of content has changed quite dramatically as well. And we're receiving tons of new types of assets, whether they're photos from webcams or photos from mobile devices, whether they're videos or people laying out entire collateral campaigns based on smaller screen sizes. So this is how an identity project used to look. You'd have your coffee mug and your CD cover and your folder and your folio and the pen and business cards, and that's really taken a much smaller proportion of your brand identity directives these days. So now that we have all these screens, it means we're actually generating more of the types of assets that we used to generate. And I know that you'll probably recognize at least half of these different types of assets down here. You've probably made them in the past. And as you are well aware, managing all of that content is extremely messy and time-consuming, especially across all the different devices that you own and across different offices that you might visit. And collaborating with your peers, whether it's collaborating from all the way from Korea back to Texas, or even if it's with the guy in the next office, it can be a pretty complicated enterprise. And getting the training that you need on new tools is also time-consuming and expensive. If you go to a conference or a trade show or you do in-house training, it takes quite an amount of time and money to get training. And so the question that many of Adobe's customers continue to ask them is, how are we supposed to keep up with all of the rapid changes that are happening? And our answer back in June 2013 and even before that in May of 2012 was, let's talk about how Adobe can answer each one of these questions, right? The creative applications, which you're all familiar with, we stopped offering them in the 18 to 24-month release cycle or cadence. We stopped offering them as CS5, CS6, CS7, CS8. And now they're ongoingly updated with the latest features that respond and change to what our users actually need. We added the capability of doing Dropbox-like file sync and adding collaboration features for sharing particular assets across groups. So we'll see a little bit more about how that works in just a minute. But we also added a community aspect that had been sorely lacking from Adobe's offerings. And so we added Behance, which is the #1 creative community in the world. We added them to our product portfolio. We added the capability of hosting your own content on the Behance side, of creating your own custom portfolio and sharing and discovering and finding inspiration amongst the creative community across the world. We also added a number of different services like Typekit and some of the other ones that you'll see. And we revamped our learning program online and also beefed up the expertise that is available to you from Adobe and the support that you'll receive. So again, to take a step back before we get too deep into each one of those, just starting with the creative apps themselves. Back in May 2012, it doesn't seem so long ago, when CS6 kind of came out on the scene, one of the things that we kind of mentioned as an asterisk down at the bottom is that you could buy it via subscription, right? And this is different than the perpetual licensing model where you buy CS6 and you own it until you're, an old person in the, when you're hobbling around with your old box of CS6 saying, I bought it and I still own it. Subscription is a different model. Subscription, you re-up every year, and if you don't need a certain part of it or you don't need any of it, then you don't re-up. And so that's been, we offered that in 2012 as kind of a let's see how people respond. And then in June 2012, the very next month, we put our very first value add into the subscription model and said, hey, anybody who's subscribed to CS6, you get Lightroom as part of your Creative Cloud subscription. Isn't that great? You didn't have Lightroom when you bought the CS6 perpetual model. If you bought it via subscription, you would get Lightroom. And then we released the capability inside of Illustrator to package all of your assets together to go out to print the same way that you do with InDesign, which Illustrator users have been asking for decades, no kidding, decades. And so we put that as a feature inside of Illustrator if you were subscribed, and people started, especially the the graphics community said, oh man, I have to subscribe now. I need to package my Illustrator assets and embed and unembed my links the way that I do in InDesign. We also released Edge Animate, which gives you the capability of HTML5 animation, and the changes kept on coming, where the new MacBooks had these retina screens that are so beautiful and awesome and make your eyes bleed with their beauty. Photoshop had to adapt to that and put in support for the retina screens. All of the buttons in Photoshop and menus needed to be upgraded to support that. And we also added this expert support, which you're going to see in a little while. Then in June, we actually refreshed the entire portfolio of applications. We went from CS6 to CC, and that's the new designation, CC apps. And we added over 100 new features across this collection of apps. We added a whole bunch of new apps, and we started integrating the Behance community directly into some of these applications. And we just kept going through July. We added to Premiere in September. We added to Photoshop. I mean, ad infinitum. We actually just shipped a whole bunch of new features in January to our core applications, Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign, which we'll go into in great detail tomorrow. But back in June, kind of the headlining features were this revolutionary camera shake reduction, where if you take an image with a shutter speed that's a little too low for the amount of light, Photoshop will actually go through and do reduction on the amount of shake and do sharpening. It'll also do smart sharpening around images that might have a little bit of kind of edge wear or a little bit of pixelation. So the smart sharpening algorithm is excellent. And then one long-standing feature request in Photoshop was to take all of the Adobe Camera Raw controls that you have for temperature and basically anything you can do in Adobe Camera Raw. Folks wanted to use that as a non-destructive filter in Photoshop, and so in the CC release in June, we added that. Now for Illustrator, we added the capability of doing tactile type editing. And again, this is back in June, so you probably have already seen this feature where you can modify each character individually, spin them, scale them, control the kerning and leading and all the things that you need to control on a per character basis, without having to disrupt the live flow of the text inside of the text frame. Really cool. Also the capability of taking a path and using an image as a pattern along that path and generating automatically the corners when you're using pattern brushes. So really great. InDesign got a big facelift in that you can do font searching very easily. You can create favorites and groups of favorites. InDesign is also now 64-bit native, so on Windows 764 it screams with very simple tasks like saving large complex files has become a lot quicker. Printing large complex files has become a lot quicker, and also the new interface, as you can see, is a lot prettier. We also put in the capability of generating QR codes natively inside of InDesign, which is fun. With Acrobat 11, which actually shipped in the middle of last year, a lot of productivity and business efficiency features which you as an Acrobat user may or may not already be familiar with, such as being able to save your PDFs as Word or Excel files, being able to edit and reuse PDFs very nicely. The editing tools have undergone a major renovation, and they work fabulously. To be able to edit and copy images and also save your PDFs now straight out to PowerPoint. There's a new Combine Files dialog, which allows you to very easily take all your Office documents and put them together and combine them and rearrange them and delete certain pages out of them while you're combining them into a single PDF. In June, we released the preview of Edge Reflow, which is a responsive design tool for the web to basically format a web layout for multiple devices. It's a really great tool, which we're going to dive into a little bit tomorrow, but responsive design, as I'm sure you're aware, is the big buzzword, and there are a lot of great features for designers who specifically need to create responsive designs. In Edge Animate, of course, HTML5-based animation, really great tool, very familiar to those of you who might have done Flash in the past. Also capability for responsive design. In June 2013, we added the capability for CSS transitions and effects, which are really beautiful, and the capability of adding motion paths to animations, which if you ever used Flash, you'll know that was kind of a staple of the animation capability. We recently added the capability for audio inside of Edge Animate projects, which has been a long-standing feature request. Now, Muse is a standalone application that allows you to create desktop, tablet, and phone-based website layouts. You can plan, prototype, build pretty painlessly. If you're an InDesign user, it'll be very familiar with you. It's a no-code environment, and you can add some pretty sophisticated effects like parallax scrolling. Now, we're not going to get into Muse tomorrow so much for reasons that I'll get into in just a minute, but it is a great tool, and it is included with some of the Creative Cloud licenses. Now, for those of you doing video, Premiere Pro has gotten to be pretty much the de facto standard in the entertainment industry and the broadcast world. We're seeing huge uptick in the adoption of Premiere across the board. We're seeing in Hollywood feature films starting to be edited with Premiere Pro just because of the editing finesse and the capabilities that it has over Avid and Final Cut, including real simple closed captioning workflow that actually works for those of us in government, which is why it's one of the kind of the standout features. And the Mercury playback engine, which has been part of Premiere for a while, which allows you to play back footage from a huge, enormous variety of cameras and codecs and sources, up to 4 and 6K resolutions, playing that back native without rewrapping or transcoding. You just play it back native, and it's a really great experience. For those of us who are in the world of motion graphics and video compositing, In After Effects CC, we introduced a live 3D pipeline with Cinema 4D, which is a Maxon tool for creating 3D models. And so you can basically create and craft your model and have a live pipeline between Cinema 4D and After Effects, which is a really great thing to watch. And we're going to get into that in our webinar series later this year. You also have the capability of refining the edge when you're doing a very complicated mask. So in other words, what we see here is somebody has gone around with the roto brush and kind of rotoscoped out this background. But of course, these are trees. So with the Refine Edge tool, you can brush along the edge of that rotoscope and refine the edge of the mask, kind of like you would in Photoshop. It's actually quite astounding to watch and just a little bit magical. Excuse me. And then, of course, industry leading warp stabilization for any kind of judder that you might have from taking handheld footage or from vehicle-based footage. So the latest apps and updates from January 2014 are things like perspective warp in Photoshop, which we're going to see tomorrow, live corners and a new pencil tool, and other features inside of Illustrator, and new rich digital publication capabilities inside of InDesign, like being able to natively place OAM files from Edge Animate and have them show up in an EPUB document or an ebook type of document. So that's on the desktop side in a nutshell how we've continued to innovate with the desktop tools. And like I said, we're going to get much more technical into these tomorrow during the 9 a.m. and 10 p.m. or I'm sorry, 10 a.m. and 9 p.m. Webinar slots. But also included in the core offering for the Creative Cloud is, like I said, this desktop sync for files and settings. So depending on what your license is, you might be able to take folders straight from your desktop and sync them up with a repository on the Creative Cloud storage servers that Adobe manages. And so that makes it a lot easier to get to your files when you are on your mobile device to see what your files are. This has been a long-standing feature request. Not only can you sync your files from your desktop up to the cloud to be able to see them, but you can also sync your application settings. So in Photoshop and many of the Creative Cloud tools, if you go and manage your sync settings, you can do it from a number of different places, either down at the lower left-hand side or in your account settings. You can actually sync things like preferences and tool presets and style swatches, gradients, all kinds of things that you use on an everyday basis. You can sync that between machines. So if you are moving from one machine to another, since you have a Creative Cloud membership, you can basically sync your settings up to your Creative Cloud account. You also have native access to your files. So, for example, I'm just looking at a thumbnail of an InDesign file that I might have uploaded to the Creative Cloud. So, if I were to look at this file on a tablet or a smartphone, I would see the same thumbnail. So I'd be able to get a real-time preview of what my InDesign file looks like. And of course, I get much more metadata, like the file info, when it was made, how big it is, which typefaces are actually being used, and what color swatches. This is actually extracting the 5 most prominent colors in the InDesign document, and I can download that as an Adobe Swatch Exchange file or view it on the Kuler service. So I can also take this InDesign file and post it publicly to my Behance site. I can download it. I can search across the Creative Cloud for other assets. But really, one of the more impressive things is that I can page through the InDesign file right here in the web browser and see the different pages that are inside of it, and that's really great. Also, around the asset management story, you can come over on the right-hand side and see any of the activities. So in other words, if I've synced this file up to the cloud and somebody else opens it up and, say, creates a new version of it, saves it and creates a new version, I'd be able to see, excuse me, what version of the file I'm actually looking at. And if anyone has left a comment on this particular page or on this particular on this file, then I would get those comments right over here on the right-hand side. So again, this is assisting in collaboration and in workflow, which is really great. If I uploaded a Photoshop file, like you see right here, over in the right-hand control panel in my web browser, again, this is just a web browser, I'd be able to see all the different layers of the Photoshop file represented. I could turn those on and off right there in the web browser and see the results in real time kind of pop up in my web browser. So that's another advantage of the Creative Cloud membership if, of course, you can access these features. Something that's coming soon that I know folks in MWR have asked about are the capability of sharing not only individual files, but also sharing folders. So I wanted to show this right here. This is being able to share and collaborate. And this will be a native pull-down very soon in this feature where I'll click one of these folders and say collaborate, and for this folder I'll be able to start inviting people to view the contents of this folder. So they'll be able to go to a website, they'll be emailed a link, and they can open it up and start collaborating. And that's coming soon. That's not currently shipping. I just knew that some folks at MWR were curious about that. And of course, if I'm a member, then I see all of my membership details. Now, I mentioned Behance, the premier creative community on the web. We've got hundreds of thousands of incredibly creative, incredibly inspiring community members who are always posting their latest projects and giving feedback. One particular artist who I thought was really interesting and who spoke at Adobe Max last year was Eric Johansson. He's done some just incredible stuff. His Behance handle is behance.net/Eric Johansson. And I was just cruising around and saw him, saw some of his pieces and some of his videos and Photoshop art, and it's just, mind-blowing. So it's definitely a fun place to kill an hour, but also to become really inspired. Another place to find inspiration around typography is Typekit, and to actually take these fonts and sync them to your desktop. As you can see, some of these fonts, actually all of these fonts that are listed here, have a little desktop icon associated with them, and that means that they can be synced directly to your desktop and used in your projects. And even PowerPoint and Word can use those fonts once they're synced. So Kuler is a color harmony swatch creator and sharing program. What you're seeing right here is a screenshot of the Kuler app for iPhone. And if I were to take out my Kuler app and point it at a bunch of bags, it would automatically pick out the 5 most prominent colors that my camera is looking at and turn those into a swatch. And the usefulness of this, it's great to have a swatch, but I really need it to come back into Illustrator. And so the advantage of being a member of Kuler is that color swatch will sync directly with my Kuler panel inside of Illustrator, and then I can go to work using those colors that I sampled from out in the field. Now, the Digital Publishing Suite is another capability that allows you to take objects, InDesign files that you may have laid out with alternate layouts, right? You may have kind of a landscape and portrait mode for your layouts, and you might want to put some more interactivity into them, such as making an image sequence or making an HTML animation, or making, what are those things called, slideshows or stuff like that. So the Folio Overlays and Folio Builder panel inside of InDesign allow you to do that very easily and very robustly. And then the DPS App Builder allows you to build native mobile applications for iOS and Android, and also currently Windows Mobile. Excuse me. So as you can see with the App Builder, you can customize that app. You can create a distribution app and upload it to the iTunes App Store, the Google Play Marketplace, the Windows Store, the Windows App Store, and distribute your application. Now, folks who have done this notably in the past, which you may be aware of, is Marines Magazine, and we actually have a video case study on their process of taking Marines Magazine from a printed publication out to a digital publication and what that looked like. It's a great video. It's only 2.5 minutes long. So I want to encourage you to go to Adobe TV and check it out. It's called The Guts to Go Digital. It's a really great case study. And Airman Magazine, which is another property of the Defense Media Activity, they followed suit, and they have a really great digital publication also using the digital publishing suite. Now, some of the folks on the phone are familiar with PhoneGap, and that is a framework. It's a free open source it's software development kit, SDK, that allows you to take your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript-based projects and build them into native mobile applications for pretty much every mobile platform on the planet. Now, PhoneGap Build, which is included with a Creative Cloud subscription, allows you to upload your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript directly into the service, which is hosted on Adobe's secure cloud, and then build those apps in the cloud for you. So this is an example actually of an Army family team building project done by the MWR folks at Fort Gordon, which is actually only 2 hours away from me here in Georgia. And this is just a mock-up of what it would look like inside of Dreamweaver if Nate over there brought in his HTML jQuery-based project and opened up the PhoneGap panel over here on the right-hand side inside of Dreamweaver and decided to build those out. Notice all these great QR codes over on the right-hand side where Nate would be able to just basically upload this HTML project, have all of those native apps built for all of these. I guess there was a BlackBerry error, right? But for Symbian, WebOS, in Windows, Android, iOS, and all of those apps are now available to the developer for download and distribution, or to distribute the QR code. So PhoneGap Build, again, you don't have to use Dreamweaver in order to use it. You can just go straight to the website here and build your application, and you can actually build your application with whatever. You don't have to use Adobe tools. But using PhoneGap Build is going to save you a ton of time. And so again, the Fort Gordon family and MWR built this great Army family team building application, which we're going to learn about on a future webinar. So I want to encourage you to stay tuned to the DoD webinar series, because we're going to be bringing you one of your very own as a case study. So that'll be exciting. Now, how do you get the latest updates with Creative Cloud? You get it through this desktop application, which can also live in your system dock or up in your system tray up at the top on Mac. And this shows you which applications you have installed. It shows you how much of your storage you have used. It shows you which desktop typekit fonts you have synced to your system. And again, Adele is one of the fonts that I have synced. It'll show me which particular typefaces in that font, in that family I have synced, and I can unsync however many of them that I want. And I can also find inspiration from Behance right inside of my desktop app. I can go through and discover all different kinds of different work if I'm looking specifically for UI, UX, or illustration or stuff like that. So there are a lot of other service offerings. We're running a little bit behind, so I don't want to get into all of them right now. But in addition to all of these different offerings, which are really great, there's also the capability of doing expert services. And so we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Now, everybody in the back of their minds who works on a secure network environment is thinking, wow, those desktop applications look really great, but I'm on Nipper or Sipper or JWix, and IT is restricting my end-user internet access. So those services look great, Jerry, but I can't use it. Survey says no, thank you. And then probably many more of you say, I'm sorry, I do not have administrative access to my own desktop. IT makes the changes for me. So I love the idea of getting all of these updates to my applications, but I can't do it without IT's approval. So getting those updates via the desktop app is not viable for me. And then somebody on the policy end is saying, well, let's say, for example, that it's great that we've got users who can actually leverage Adobe's cloud, but that storage and those services aren't FedRAMP approved or FISMA approved, which can be an issue in government agencies. So they would nix, the Adobe services. So the question becomes, how can you get it, and what exactly can you get? So it's helpful here to delineate what the difference between online and offline deployment is. So the core applications from the Creative Suite 6 timeframe, which are these over here, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, Prelude, Flash, Flash Builder, and et cetera, those can be deployed offline securely just fine, as can some of these other applications like Lightroom, InCopy, Edge Animate, Edge Code, Reflow, Scout, and that SDK. But, these can all be packaged for deployment into an offline environment by IT using this utility called the Creative Cloud Packager, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And the Creative Cloud Packager can take these applications, put a serial number in them, which will deactivate them from requiring an online authentication, and then package them into standards compliant packages for deployment on your network. Now, that's great, but many of the wonderful services like Typekit and Behance and Digital Publishing Suite, PhoneGap Build, even Muse and Edge Inspect, some of these other services, and Kuler, those are online only, right? So there's not currently a way for somebody who's on NIP or SIP or JWICs or who has a very constricted network environment to be able to access those easily. So there are 3 basic license types for DoD, like Sharon was alluding to in the past. There's the Creative Cloud for individuals and teams, and in that offering, that's really an online-only offering. So you have to have the end user of the applications must have internet access and an Adobe ID to identify them. But there are 2 licensing options for DoD that are where you can do offline deployment. One is called the Creative Cloud Desktop Apps, and that is, as it sounds, just the desktop applications, none of the services. We basically peel off the services in any of the desktop apps that cannot be deployed securely, and so you can buy via a CLP or cumulative licensing program for that, but there's also an enterprise offering, which I know that MWR marketing has, or at least the folks at Fort Sam, I believe, have that. So in the offline deployment scenario, again, you can use at least all of the desktop applications, and updates to those applications can be deployed by IT, or you can package them yourself if you can find an online machine and get access to the serial number. So again, like I said, MWR has Creative Cloud for Teams and Creative Cloud for Enterprise. There's a bit of a mix, and some folks may have access to Teams, some folks may have access to Enterprise. Now, the Teams, if you are a Teams licensee, then you do have access to the services and storage. If you're an Creative Cloud Enterprise licensee, there's not currently service access available, right? So it's really offline deployment only, and it's a serial-based deployment. So in the Creative Cloud for Teams, which you may already be a licensee for, the person who does the procurement and provisioning of licenses has this nifty little administrative and provisioning portal that they can go to on Adobe's website, and they can invite new users, they can subtract new users, they can provision new users, and they can add new seats as they go. And what happens is the desktop users who are invited to become a Creative Cloud for Teams member will get an email that they have to create an Adobe ID. Once they get an Adobe ID, they're sent a link to either download the Creative Cloud desktop app, through which they can then get started with their subscription, or they're not allowed to do that because the administrator has forbidden them to actually use that desktop application. And then the administrator will package up the applications using the Creative Cloud Packager, which is this utility right here, and deploy any or all of the Creative Cloud packages and updates directly to the end users. So it depends on what kind of environment you're in as to what's going to work best. If everybody on your team has internet access and administrative privileges on their computer, then they can use this Creative Cloud desktop application because they have their own Adobe ID, they can get through to the network, download their software, download the updates, and install them, and it's no big deal. But if IT is restricting that, then IT can download the packages, download the updates, push them out to the end users through a variety of means. Now, the end user is still required. You see that says online only. The end user still requires an internet connection. And that's important to keep in mind for the Creative Cloud for Teams license, because the end users still require to call back out to Adobe every 99 days to validate that their license is active. And if it can't validate, then the software will give you a warning 30 days ahead of time and then shut off after 99 days. So with the Creative Cloud for Enterprise license, now this is true offline deployment. And so your IT personnel will go to Adobe's very formal-looking licensing website and enter their credentials, download the packager, create packages, which are MSIs or PKG files, and then deploy back behind your secure firewall. Now, IT is going to require internet access in this scenario. But once IT has downloaded and packaged the applications, the users themselves do not require any internet or administrative rights because the packaging is actually done differently with the enterprise license. You put in a serial number to the packager, and you don't put in a serial number with the Creative Cloud for Teams. It's entitlement-based on calling out to Adobe servers. So again, the Creative Cloud for Enterprise offline deployment, this is for your Nipper, Sipper, JWix, desktops. And of course, since we've got this secure firewall, you're not going to see any of the services available to those end users. Now, a lot of the questions that I'll usually get are, how much storage do I get with each offering? Do I, what is the basic breakdown in differences? And we actually have a full feature comparison matrix here at this website. And, like I said, you can download this slide deck and take a look at that at your discretion. We also have a number of guides for IT if they want to control access to specific Creative Cloud services behind their firewall. We provide a comprehensive set of network endpoints to block and or allow for particular services. So let's say you don't want to let anyone use PhoneGap Build, but you want to let everyone use Digital Publishing Suite. So this has all the network endpoints that you'd need to allow. And we also have a security FAQ, because one of the biggest questions we get in defense is, if we were to use your cloud services, how secure are they? What type of encryption do they use? Is the encryption at rest, for data at rest? Is it for data in transit? How do you protect it? What is your physical security and failover? Do you comply with all the different controls? So we have a white paper on the security model. And another question we get a lot is tracking our software. And so we have a software ID tag identification white paper for Creative Cloud. And so that's really for IT. If they're deploying anonymously out into your environment with serial numbers, they might want to track how many people did I actually deploy to. If they're not writing it down, they can also track via software ID tags, which are written as XML files into every installation. Now, we have a much more comprehensive deployment video that yours truly created that lives on Adobe TV. It's everything you ever wanted to know about packaging and updating Creative Cloud apps behind your firewall. But I wanted to take a minute and talk about support and training. If you are a Teams licensee, a Creative Cloud for Teams licensee, you can actually go to this URL and do chat support anytime. You also have a dedicated phone number, and that phone number is available 24/5. You can also email using the this URL right here. It's 24/5, meaning it's Monday through Friday. And the Creative Cloud for Enterprise licensees, they actually have IT and deployment support 24/7. And so the email addresses are different, right? The tech support email address is aacc2cs@adobe.com, and the enterprise customer service is ecs@adobe.com, and it's also a different dedicated phone number. So if you're a Teams licensee and you call the enterprise line, they're basically going to figure out what your license is and kick you back there, and vice versa. If you're an enterprise licensee and you call the Teams line, you'll get kicked over to the enterprise customer support. So, that's why I put these up here, is for your reference. Again, you can download this deck a little bit later. But better than technical support and customer support is expert services, because let's say you're all set up and you're ready to go, and you watched Jerry's webinar, and you said, you know what, that's great that I've now learned the 12 new things in Photoshop, the 5 new things in After Effects, and the 3 new things in Illustrator, but I need actual workflow advice. I need advice on a particular project, or I want to know everything there is to know about this particular feature that Jerry talked about in a one-on-one with an Adobe expert. And so that's what expert services is there for. It's basically it's for, you can talk to someone like me about the Adobe services, but it's basically at your beck and call, right? I'm part of the sales organization, so I work on new accounts, and then the accounts that have already bought in, we've got an entire team of experts who are waiting to talk to you about your web projects, video projects, print and digital publishing, and photography. So it's basically a significant investment by Adobe in expert services. If you're a Teams licensee, you can have 2 sessions per user per year, and you can set that up by going to expert-service@adobe.com. In Creative Cloud for Enterprise, you basically get an unlimited number of sessions per user per year, and you can set that up also through the same channel. Now, unlimited sessions per user per year, what that means, if you have a Creative Cloud for Enterprise license, which are usually on the bigger side. It's not necessarily 20 users. It might be 50 or 100 users. So unlimited sessions means that you could potentially take 2 30-minute sessions and put it into a 60-minute session and hold it, instead of just one-on-one, you could invite a group, just like at this webinar right now, and have somebody talk to you specifically about your project. So really think of the expert services as a consulting organization that will help you, with Adobe best practices on your projects. And it's a great new service that's part of the Creative Cloud. If you're more introverted, which many of us designers are, and you don't necessarily want to talk to a human, we actually have a brand new Creative Cloud learning portal, which is top-notch. It keeps you up to date on all the new features, and here's the link down here. But if you're a Creative Cloud for Teams licensee, you can actually get tutorials inside of the applications themselves. When you launch the latest version of Illustrator 17.1, you actually get a splash screen that shows you the top 3 features that I'm going to go over tomorrow: live corners, pencil tool, path segment reshape. And you can play those videos right there inside of Illustrator. Same with Dreamweaver, Edge Animator, or even Photoshop. You can now watch your videos directly inside of the tools, which is pretty cool. So I realize that we're running a little bit behind, and I do apologize for that. I wanted to just talk about really quickly a great new case study we have with one of our customers in the Navy, the Naval Undersea Warfare Center. And ordinarily, I would send you a link to the video testimonial that we just put together with them, but it has not been approved by Navy Public Affairs yet. But suffice it to say, they are doing, these folks at the Naval Undersea Warfare Center in Newport, Rhode Island, are doing some very bleeding-edge multimedia composition with Adobe tools, with all the Adobe tools that you see listed here. This is just a small sampling of some of the stuff that they're doing. It's really cool, and I can't wait to be able to share the actual video testimonial with you on that. So I've got about 5 minutes for Q&A. I did want to show you that we have a customer showcase. We have a blog. I want to encourage you to tune in tomorrow to actually get deeper into these tools, right, to our digital imaging workflows, illustration, and graphics. And I'm really going to dive into each one of these for, kind of the top new features and new workflows that you'll see coming out of them. But I also wanted to encourage you to sign up for the more comprehensive webinar series that we're doing specifically for DoD. And we're not going to be talking a lot about the team licenses because we don't see so many of those in Department of Defense. We're really going to be talking about folks that are deployed to NIPR, SIPR, and JWICs who can only get the desktop app. So we're really going to focus on those apps. for this webinar series and also on our enterprise tools. And if you happen to be in San Antonio on Tuesday, March 11th at 8 a.m., we're actually coming to you live, which is cool. And Sharon, I don't know if you knew that, but we're going to be there. We're going to do a whole 4-hour session, including Creative Cloud and doing some Acrobat stuff. So that's going to be fun. San Antonio was very fun to visit last year. So the last piece I want to do before we go is how can I get these slides, right? So take out your phone and zap the screen or type in this URL. And I am going to go back over here now and stop. No, you know what? I don't need to stop sharing my screen. Oh, you know what? I am going to stop sharing and move to our outro layout.